This is the last video in the Ad-Hoc report series, and in this video we're going to be discussing some more intermediate rules when building filters and conditions in enhanced Ad-Hoc reports, and then we're going to take a look at standard Ad-Hoc reports. Okay, so first up, these two rules in enhanced Ad-Hoc reports are going to both focus in filters and conditions. And now I first want to look down here into this condition we built in the last video, where it says status name equals active. So first up, you might be wondering why it says status name. And we did sort of address this in the last video, but just to be perfectly clear, what's happening here is when I chose the status field from the drop-down list, it asked me to select a linked field. And then in this linked field drop-down list, it has things like allow email, date entered, date updated, etc., including the status name, which I had selected. And then when you do that, it shows the name of the field from the contract table, and then the name of the field on the status table, which you're referencing. And now the lesson here is that choosing status name as a condition is not necessarily the best practice. I chose it in the last video because it does work, and it is the most intuitive when you're just getting started. But there is a slightly more advanced rule that I think is better practice and a little bit more surefire when you're building ad hoc reports. The issue with building conditions off of just the status name is that if I went into the status table and I changed the name of active to something else, or there's other things that I adjusted, just kind of filtering off of some text is not necessarily the best way to do it, the more surefire way to do this is to actually filter off of the status ID. And here's what I mean. When you are looking at any of these tables, companies, employees, and then things like department, location, record type, and status, the system doesn't necessarily care that this status is called active. It cares that it's status ID 33. It doesn't care this is called request. It cares that it's status ID 47. So really, the better practice here is that when you are building conditions that refer to any of those standalone tables, like companies, employees, departments, statuses, record types, it's preferable to build it off of the ID field of that respective table. So instead, it would look more like this. Let me remove that filter, save that. Go back to field selection, choose the field from the drop-down list. And then now in this drop-down list, I want to choose status ID instead. And I'd really only do this if I am building a condition off of the field that I'm selecting. So when you see this drop-down list, and if you're selecting this field for a condition, you probably want to use the ID field. I don't really need to show this on the report, but I'll show it anyway in this case, just so you see what it looks like. And then I'll click Add Field. I will go back to Filters and Conditions, add my condition, in this case choosing status ID, and then voila. Now it does give me the drop down, so it's very, very surefire. It's much easier to select the right one. It's not going to be susceptible to any typos, changing the status name, nothing like that. It's going to work every time. If I click Save and Preview, of course it'll still work. And now you'll see status ID is always 33. That's the ID number that I'm building the condition upon. Of course, I could turn that column off. I don't really need to see it, but still, that's how this works. And this comes up pretty often if you're building conditions off of statuses, company type or contract types and company types, request types, solicitation types, any types, and then also department. Those are the three situations this arises most often. Next, I want to talk about the scenario where I'm building an ad hoc report based on a certain date range. And that might look like this. So let's say I want to see active contracts expiring in 120 days, right, in that range. I like to call this a rolling date period. That's my personal name for this. I think it makes sense to me. So it's going to roll, right? So if today I'm looking forward to 120 days. If it's tomorrow, I'm looking forward to 120 days from tomorrow. No matter what day you're on, you're going to look forward to 120 days. Okay. The intuitive way to build this usually, if you're new, is to go to filters and conditions. Choose your condition. and then choose the expiration date. Choose, in this case, maybe between today's date, which is April 14th, and then 120 days from now, which is, say, roughly August 14th, give or take, and then save. So now if I scroll down, I will see a report that you can see is active, and the expiration date falls within that range I'm looking for. So it works, right? Perfect. Sort of. This will always just show me contracts that expire within this very defined rigid date range. So it's not really what I'm looking to do in this scenario. Instead, what you want to do is just remove that. When I'm choosing the expiration date field, as well as any other date fields, I will receive this select linked field drop-down list. Now, in this drop-down list, the first option is just expiration date. And that's what I just chose a moment ago, which is what folks usually do. That would just show, 4-14-20-2025. It just shows the date. If you're just adding a date to see the date, that's what you want every time. You just leave it on that, you're good to go. But if you are adding the date for condition purposes, you might want to choose one of these other options, namely the first one. We have date diff days, expiration date, date diff months, date diff years. What this will do is subtract the date. What this will do is subtract the expiration date from today's date. So if I choose date diff days expiration date and something expires today, it will say 0. If something expires tomorrow, it will say 1. If something expired yesterday, it would say -1. So now let's go back to filters and conditions. Let's add that condition again, but this time choose date diff days expiration date, and then choose between. And what you want to do is put the smallest date first. And what you want to do is put the smallest number first. So 0 would be today. So if something expires today, it's going to show up on the report, right? I still want to see it. And then 120 days from now, looking forward 120 days, and I run this, and I'll see that. And I like to leave this here. You might want to, you could turn this off when you're actually building the report, but at least for example purposes, I want to see it. You can see this contract is expiring in 109 days, right? So this is how you build this. Looking forward, X number of days. And then anything that falls within this range will show up on the report. Very quickly, let me also acknowledge what if you want to see things that were entered 120 days ago or, something like that, right? Looking backwards, basically. There's a number of scenarios you could apply here. But let's say I want to see contracts that expired 120 days ago or within 120 days. I'll just really do the same thing, but invert this. Okay, date diff days, expiration date between -120 and 0. So let's see if any contracts in my system were active and expired. Okay, I didn't have any, but that's no problem. This is how you build it. The smallest date first, and then the largest, and I'm going to look within this date range, and the number is always going to change day to day. Hope this makes sense. This is how we build rolling date periods, and they are very, very common. Next, let's quickly talk about standard ad hoc reports. Again, I don't use standard ad hoc reports most of the time, but they are very, very helpful if I am building reports about subtables, where the subtable is like the subject of the report. The most common situation here is seeing workflow tasks, open workflow tasks, pending workflow tasks, ones that are overdue, so on and so forth. But it could be on a variety of other subtables if the report is about amendments or about company contacts or about any other information that lives in a subtable. For this example, I'm just going to jump over to an existing ad hoc report that I have built. Much of building a standard ad hoc report is the same as building an enhanced ad hoc report, so we won't waste the time doing it all from scratch. So here we are under a standard ad hoc report. And I'm just going to highlight the differences here. Again, if you know how to build an enhanced ad hoc report, you could probably figure out building a standard ad hoc report. So the first difference you'll notice is between overview and tables. Those two tabs have been combined into one, okay? And you're not going to see the enable field editing setting here. That enable field editing setting is only available with enhanced, not standard. Now here's a big difference. If I scroll down, I'm going to see my selected tables. And you're going to choose a primary table as always. You're going to choose between contracts, requests, whatever the table you're working with. Okay. I chose contract requests in this case. It doesn't really make a difference. It could be contracts, requests, solicitations, companies, whatever. But it's probably going to be one of your primary tables exclusively. Then we're going to see a number of linked and subgrid tables to select from. And you'll notice these are checkboxes. Let's break down how this works. So first, linked tables are the other primary tables of the system, essentially like categories, contract details, contract types, departments, employees, etc., etc. Just for example's sake, I'll click employees. I'll choose that so you can see what it looks like later on. And so this basically allows me to pull information from other tables of the system. Then we have subgrid. I said in the previous video, but standard ad hoc reports are literally a little bit older. And subgrid is like the older name for subtables. So a subgrid and a subtable are really the same thing. And in this case, you can choose one subtable, one subgrid. And so you're going to want to choose the primary table that you want to report upon here. In this case, I chose request task details. I want to see workflow tasks, anything about workflow on my requests. That's the subtable that I had chosen. Okay, but you could choose, of course, different subtables if you want to. But this happens to be a report about, all open workflow tasks. So then you can click Save or Update Information. Now let's move over to field selection. The UI is a bit different, but most of the principles are the same. On the left-hand side, you are going to notice that I have contract request fields, right? That's of course, from the contract request table. But I also have fields from other areas of the system as well. So if I scroll a little bit more, I have employee details. Remember, I chose that employee table on the previous tab. Then I have fields from my subtable, request task details. I have vendor customers, which is another table I had chose. And then I have some other fields from contract request. There's other drop downs, system ID fields, and some other miscellaneous options near the bottom that you might work with. Right, so all of the tables and subtables you chose back in the table section are available here. You can see all of the fields right front and center. All you'll do is choose the field. You can hold Control or Shift to grab the fields in bulk, and then click the right arrow to add them to the right-hand side. Okay, so on the right-hand side here in this report, you see I have contract requests, right? There's a field from contract requests, and then you have a field from vendors customers, and I have a few fields from request task details, task name, employee assigned to, contract request field again, the status of contract request. Basically, I'm pulling fields from various tables and subtables I have selected on the left-hand side. Again, you can rearrange the order of them, choose to toggle if it's going to show or not, and change the display name. Then we'll go over to filters and conditions. And from here, you're just setting up filters and conditions. But the beauty of it is I can add conditions based on fields from various tables and subtables. So I can add a condition from a subtable, like I have here, like the status of the task is open. So if I also want to add a filter based on a field from the primary table, like request title, I can do that. Okay. But basically, I can combine filters from the subtables and the primary table, which you cannot do in enhanced ad hoc reports. And this is what the report would look like. So again, here's a field based on the primary table, request details. This is based on the vendor customer table, and this is based off the subtable. If this were an enhanced ad hoc report, all of this task information, which is sort of the focal point of this report, would be isolated in a separate drop-down list, and it wouldn't be up here displayed with all the primary data, and you couldn't add conditions based on that subtable field. So this is how I would build a report based on subtables, such as a workflow-focused ad hoc report. So I hope this helps illuminate why we would use standard ad hoc reports. I think the primary use case is if you want to build reports based on subtables. And this is the last video in the Ad-Hoc report series. I hope it's helpful. Definitely try these out. If you did puck up in the middle of this series, I recommend starting from the beginning to get the foundation. And certainly feel free to reach out to training@cobblestonesoftware.com with any questions. Thank you.